everyone, welcome to Liz Creed Podcast. As always, it's your boy Astrid, joined here by...
Liz!
Doesn't roll off the tongue quite as much, but hey. Now, I could not be more stoked for this because today is the first ever streaming of the Liz Creed Podcast, which is insane. Liz, how do you feel about this?
Well, even though I would have rather stay in bed, I could not miss this.
So we could say that you are just as excited.
Indeed, I am.
That is great to hear. Anyways, for our first stream, we wanted to talk about something that is different, but not super complex or odd.
But also something that people can agree and relate with. Something that makes people go, oh, I totally understand this. Yet something that is not your generic topic of conversation. And we have been thinking long and hard about this, and we have decided to talk about...
Well, we don't really have a title for this one, but essentially it is other ways to learn besides school. You see, both of us could tell you that various forms of media and entertainment have taught us many things that school would never do. Despite the fact that most of these are commonly dismissed, there is still evidence to prove otherwise.
So basically, we are here to prove that video games are not as useless as you think. Books are not as lame as you think. Knowledge is not as direct as you think. And most of all, the goal is to show you that learning is not as boring as you think.
That is correct. Now, let's get right into the news! Alright, so, to open this gracious discussion, we are going to talk things we have learned with video games. Although gaming is considered to be a waste of time by many, there is more than a couple of studies that show the opposite.
Indeed, for example, one study showed that playing video games improves your reflexes and hand-eye coordination. Another one showed that it improves your memory and so on. Now, when it comes to learning with video games, why don't we share our personal experiences? Astrid, anything you'd like to share?
Well, there is something I would like to share. An experience that really stuck out to me was while playing Nioh, which is a game set in Japan during the Sengoku period. Hence why I learned a lot about Japan's history, culture, folklore, important figures, you name it. I learned that William Adams was an Irish pirate who became the first Western samurai in the world upon crashing at Japan and meeting with Hattori Hanzo, which is an important figure in history of Japan. Something I know that I would have never learned in school because, the reason is quite obvious. But what about you, Liz?
Well, I remember learning with a game called Warframe. With it, I learned about Phobos, which is the outermost moon of Mars. I don't think that school will have taught me that.
Very interesting. This goes to show you that some games can feel just like any class in school.
Now, time for a little break. Now, it's time for listening experiences where you learn things with cartoons, TV shows, or movies. First, Astrid, share your knowledge with movies.
Well, I have learned plenty of science and astronomy with films like Interstellar, Martian, plenty of sci-fi films. For example, I remember once learning that time in outer space is a lot slower than Earth time.
Oh, very interesting. In my experience, I learned geography and world history with an anime called Italia. The characters of this anime are a human incarnation of the countries. Italia show history in a funny way, so it's not boring. Also, I remember a phrase from Italia that is from the character Italia, make pasta not war, which means that it's better be friends each other rather than see our differences. I think that is a great lesson, don't you think?
It is a wise saying indeed. Reminds me of another phrase I saw at Las Alitas, which said, make wings, not war. But that one is better.
Oh, I see. Also, I learned about famous people in a TV show on Netflix called The Who Was Show. I already see 7 episodes, and I discovered that William Shakespeare, before being a writer, he worked in a glove factory. And Benjamin Franklin made an investigation about farts. Alright, I think that is enough for now. Why don't we move on to the next segment?
Hey, hey, hey! Hey, hey, hey! Wasso, 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 wasso! We're back once again. Now, it is quite possible that upon saying this, you'll instantly label this the most boring section of today's podcast, but we will be discussing things we have learned in books. But hey, hear me out. We are not talking about textbooks or any of that crap school loves to bombard you with, but rather the kind of books that we read for fun, to entertain ourselves, you know? Liz, have you got anything to share?
Yes, I used to read, and I remember a book named El Ejecutor. With that book, I learned psychology and how the detectives studies the criminals. I recommend that book. That is from Catherine Dore. What about you, Astrid?
Well, actually, I haven't learned much besides mythology, since it is what I read the most. But I could mention that I learned a lot about Norse mythology with Norse Myth by Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is an American writer who wrote the original story of Coraline, by the way. A huge recommendation if you dig stories about gods fighting and drinking and fornicating
Stop!
themselves.
I need to share something. I just remember that with musicals, I also learned few things. Like with Be More Chill, I learned that the technologies in excess are bad, and you don't need to pretend be someone else. Just be chill, like Jeremy said. And also, I learned the history of American independence thanks to the musical Alexander Hamilton, a hero that helped in the process of the independence. You see, maybe I will help my country because there's a million things I haven't done, but just you wait. That is what Hamilton said.
Okay, well, thanks for interrupting my fuck.
Okay, bye. Bye, everyone. Goodbye.
You motherfucker!